Well, we finished our sermon series, Going Public, and I so appreciated Pastor Brian's message last week about going public at the altars, and Jen referred to that as she was closing us in prayer, where the veil is thin at that place where we meet with God at the altars. And the message I want to bring with you is not a part of a series, just one that the Lord had placed on my heart about 3 weeks ago, titled, Pardon the Interruption. If we have any sports enthusiasts, you know the TV show, Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, they argue about sports events and sports stories of the day, and sometimes it gets a little bit heated, and they're interrupting each other all the time. And I was thinking about how it just seems like life is one big interruption, right? That everything is an interruption when it doesn't fit into my box or conform with my plans. Now, guys, what are you guys talking about? Guys, we're in the middle of church. Can we talk about this later, please? Pizza sounds great, but let's talk about that a little later. Man, interruptions, they come from all over the place, right? You could be in a conversation with somebody and they cut you off in the middle of your sentence. This happens to me a lot of times. I'm working on a project and then something else will pop up in my brain or something else will happen and I have to break away from that project. That other thing becomes the interruption of my day. There's also some interruptions that just completely change the course of your life, and those are the big ones. That you're like, where are you at in all this, God? Oh, come on. Emery, what are you doing, man?
I'm just doing my guitar.
Somebody help me out here. What's going on this morning? Hey, I get it. It's out of tune. I think we can all hear that it's out of tune. but is there any chance that maybe you could do that after the service, please? Okay. Well, thank you. So we know the reality is that interruptions are a part of life, right? Your phone buzzes, right? It could be sitting over here, and I could be talking to Emery, and I hear my phone buzz, and all of a sudden we become distracted by the interruption. We go to see what is on there. Your phone dings because you got an email. I don't know about you, but 95% of the emails I get are ones I don't care about anyway. I'm going to delete them, but for whatever reason, I hear that ding, and automatically my brain is going to that interruption. Or maybe you are, you're into social media, and you get a sound that pops up, and you're like, man, you got to go to your phone. Is everybody okay? Did that sound, was that because somebody just liked my last post? What is it that, okay. What is going on? Guys, I think Brad, what are you doing up? I think we all heard that, man. It came through everything. I'm trying to preach this morning. I mean, I love that stuff. It's cool and everything, but probably not for right now. All right. Hopefully we're done. Well, maybe you have felt like your life has been one big interruption. I don't know about you, but I will be honest with you and say that there are, as I trace back events of life, I wish I had some do-overs, right? I wish that I could kind of go back and change some things because of some interruptions in my life. But while there are some interruptions that I'd like to have as a do-over, what if the interruption is from God? How would you know? How would you know if that pause in your story is because God is wanting to reveal something to you, show you something, teach you something, whatever it is? What do we do with that? What if that interruption from God is an unplanned assignment and it changes the course of your life? Like, would you be attentive to it? Would you know what that sounds like if it's coming from the Lord? What if that interruption is God pulling you out of a bad situation, or he sees something that's coming and he's trying to give you that red flag and say, I'm trying to get your attention. Would you be able to tell? And I believe that there are some interruptions from God that are simply a call for us to be still, just to be still. I've titled this sermon, Pardon the Interruption, and I want you to receive this message as though it is God saying it to you. That it's God that is saying, Emery, pardon the interruption, or going around the room and I'm looking at each one of you and I'm thinking, what if God is saying to each one of us, pardon the interruption? There are things that I want to do in your life, but you got to be still long enough to know what that is. There's things God is saying to us that he wants to reveal about himself to us, but we're not still long enough. Things that God's trying to save us from, but we don't realize it at the moment. Kelly and I and our family had a real life experience with this 2 weeks ago. We've had a hard year, and we were 100% certain of some decisions we were going to make that were going to be big for our whole family. And we had planned a prayer retreat. And, you know, I'm a man, and I just don't always think through things. Thankfully, I thought before I spoke at this particular occasion, but Kelly had asked for us to go on a prayer retreat. And in my brain, my man brain, I'm thinking, why are we going on a prayer retreat? We already know what the answer is. We went on this prayer retreat. We got away from life, got away from stuff, and God revealed something totally different. Totally different. And what I learned through that whole thing is that my daily life is full of interruptions that cloud my ability oftentimes to hear from God. And I would imagine it's probably the same story for many of us that are here this morning. So I want to look at a very familiar passage of Scripture this morning in Luke chapter 10. Now, of course, you guys know it'll be up on the screen behind me, but if you want to open a Bible, there's Bibles in the chairs, so hopefully somewhere nearby you. But this is the parable of the Good Samaritan, and it's really a story of interruptions. And we're going to break down these interruptions a little bit in just a second. But I want to read the whole context of the story so you see it, and then we're going to look at each interruption as it comes up in our story. So Luke chapter 10, verse 25. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him, that's Jesus, to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, What is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus said to him, You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But he, this is the lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him pass by, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side as well. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. So This story begins with an interruption. This is in the middle of an opportunity that Jesus has taken to minister to crowds of people. Lots of people are in attendance. They're hearing what he has to say, and this teacher of the law interjects into this story a question that he really wasn't looking for an answer for. You see, he's a teacher of the law. He's a lawyer. He knows exactly what the scripture says about how to live life. He is the expert in law. So what is he doing? He becomes an interruption in Jesus' life. He's trying to trip Jesus up. He's trying to see if he can get Jesus' life and his message to somehow have friction against each other so he can call Jesus out as a fraud, as a liar. Rather than Jesus being struggling with it and being annoyed by this guy and pushing him away and saying, I don't have time for you, he uses this interruption as a teaching opportunity. So he tells this story of this man who's traveling on this road between Jerusalem and Jericho. And this would have been very easy for Jesus' listeners to understand. You see, this was a path that was traveled daily. Hundreds and hundreds of people traveled this road daily. It was about a 15-mile journey from start to finish. Took a little over 8 hours, depending on your pace. And it was roughly a height elevation difference of 3,300 feet. So this was a very tiring, hard, laborious trip. But people took it every day, all the time. Here was the problem. In real life, it was also a place where robbers knew some hiding places, and if you were to be traveling on that road and they decided to jump out and try to rob you, they had a lot of good hiding spots. So Jesus was using an analogy that would have made sense to his readers. It's like if I were to use an illustration about something on Route 3, you would say, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is. Oh yeah, I know what's going on over there, right? You would just automatically have a visual idea, understanding of what was going on in that situation or in that place because you know it. Jesus' listeners were in the same place when he began to share this parable. So let's look at the first two men mentioned here. One was a priest and the other was a Levite. Now these guys were considered to be religious, holy men who were supposedly devoted to God, at least outwardly, and men that others were supposed to look up to. As a matter of fact, they would have had different garb on. They would have had a different look about them. You would have been able to tell that this man is a priest and this man is probably a Levite. There would have been some differences there than the average person that might have been making this trek back and forth. And here's the other thing. They were also Jewish men. And remember, this is a parable. This is not real life. Jesus is trying to give us an illustration of a point he's trying to make. But these religious men are Jewish, just like the traveler who was beaten up. So you would think, well, they would show compassion to this man who has been robbed and is left half dead on the side of the road. So why did Jesus use them as the example of the ones that went out of their way to avoid this man who was laying on the side of the road? I've got two theories about it. I would imagine you'll come up with more if you want, and that's fine. But number one, I think that maybe it's because they were too busy to care. And isn't that true for many of us oftentimes, that we can't be bothered by anything that didn't make it into our day planner? I would imagine many of your schedules are much like mine. I know when I go to bed tonight what my day looks like tomorrow. I know what tomorrow night when I go to bed, I know what Tuesday is going to look like. It's planned out. I've got a lot, we have all this stuff going on. But I think sometimes we can get to a place where we're too busy to care about the things that God cares about. I think it's also possible that God presented the need, but because we're so busy, our prayer goes something like this. God, I know you're asking me to do this, but Lord, could you please send Melody? Right? God will speak to you. He'll have something he wants to share with you, and then you'll say to God, God, somebody else. Would you ask somebody else? I don't have time. I'm too busy. I don't understand the Bible well enough. I'm not an evangelist. I can't speak well. Listen, every argument that you have about not doing the will of God is recorded in between the hardcovers of this book too. It's not original. God uses us despite the things that we feel like we don't have to offer. But the problem here for us Americans anyway is oftentimes we are just too busy with the things that are going on around us, that when God is trying to give us an interruption, when he's trying to interrupt our lives because he has something for us, we're too busy to hear it. We're too busy to pay attention to it. I also wonder if these two men were too caught up in their titles. I'm a priest. I'm a holy man. I don't touch people who are bleeding. That's somebody else's job. Hung up on a title maybe. I remember years and years ago, I was at the church that my ministry, my pastoral ministry was launched at, Highway Assembly of God. My pastor was Dick Jackson. It was a Wednesday night Bible study, and he was preaching on loving the unlovable, loving people that are different than you, going out of your way, letting God stretch you to use you to do things. Guys, no joke. This is like crazy stuff. A homeless guy walks in, and he is smelly, and he has a dirty backpack with him. He has yellow UV glare glasses because of light was too hard for him. He didn't have cotton to put in his ears, so he had ripped up pieces of t-shirt in his ears. And he sat through this message that Pastor Dick was preaching on loving people that are different than you, people that you ordinarily might not associate with. And we got to the end of that service. God had placed the illustration right in front of us. And the only two people that went over to greet this man were he and I. And I've thought to myself, what is wrong with that picture? Are we so caught up in the title that I'm a Christian and I attend Riverside Church that I don't have time to do anything else? Isn't that enough, God? Like I give you Sunday mornings. What else do you want from me? I think sometimes God is just trying to get us to a place where that interruption brings us back into relationship with Jesus Christ. Here's the kicker. It says that both of those men passed by on the other side of the road. You know what that tells me? They saw the problem, but they didn't want to be interrupted. They saw the problem. They knew what God was asking them to do, and they chose to walk away. So we come to the Samaritan. Now, if we have, I know many of you are Bible scholars in this room, you already know that Samaritans and Jews do not get along. This is in Bible times. They were not friends. They would go out of their way to not associate with one another. And so who better than for Jesus to make a contrast between a religious person and a Samaritan, right? And so the Samaritan is doing the same thing that the priest and the Levite are doing. He's traveling. He's on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, or maybe he's going the opposite direction. That part doesn't matter. But he's traveling. That means he's on a mission. He's got something he's got to do. He's got a plan for his day. He's got to get somewhere. But he comes up on this Jewish man who has been beaten and robbed and is laying on the side of the road, half dead. And rather than the Samaritan walking over to the other side of the road, he stops what he's doing and pays notice of this guy. Pastor Pete, he retired not too long ago, and I just love that he's in a season right now where the Lord is using him to minister to homeless people. And when he started the first time, he just went up to one person that was standing at the median and got to know them. You know what he found out? They're human beings too. They need Jesus too. But most of us, Steve Weber included, will turn on my turn signal and keep going. Now, I'm not saying homeless people. I guess I keep bringing it back. I'm not talking about that in general. I'm talking about listening to the voice of God, being available to God. But the Samaritan now comes to this man on the side of the road who's beaten, bruised, dead, almost dead. And this now becomes an interruption in his life. Not only that, but he becomes a potential target for the same robbers and thieves that beat the other guy up. Now, we would have commended this Samaritan man simply for stopping to check on the guy, right? We would have been like, oh man, great job, bud. You checked on him, well done. But he doesn't stop there. He has compassion for this man's situation. So he binds up the wounds. He pours oil and some things on it. Like it was like a balm to help stop the bleeding, to help maybe aid in the bruising, to help this man to kind of wake up a little bit. He puts him on his donkey. It'd be like you coming up on a situation and somebody needs a ride and you're like, here's the keys. We wouldn't do that, but that's what the Samaritan man does. He says, here's the key, here's my donkey. I'm going to put you on my donkey. You know what that meant? He was going to be inconvenienced. He was going to have to walk. This is a hard terrain. He's going to have to walk this out now. Then he takes the man to this inn and he helps this guy out a little bit more. Then he gives the innkeeper 2 denarii. He says, listen, man, don't forget, he was still on this path because he had a purpose, right? He was still heading somewhere. So he gives the innkeeper 2 denarii and he says, guy, listen, I need you to take care of this injured man, and I will be back. And when I come back, if I owe you anything else, I will pay you for it. But please take care of this man. You see, he didn't see that interruption as one that was going to hinder his ability to carry out the things that he already had doing. I think that's mentally sometimes we don't pause long enough to hear God's voice when he's trying to say something to us. Now, I'll just say that not all interruptions are like this particular story, right? I think this is more about availability, though. Availability to God, to say yes when everything inside of me says no, or the availability to be willing to be uncomfortable, maybe even put out for a season so that God can get something done in somebody else's life. It's an interruption, yes, but God wants to work in those things to help make a difference in the world around you. Some interruptions are just simply you becoming available to God so that he can speak to your life and to your situation. So I just want to review, the Bible is full of interruptions. Every story you look at, there's interruptions. And each one of those interruptions are designed to teach us something about the character and the voice and the heart of God. So I just want to share a couple of those with you, and hopefully maybe you can connect with some of those interruptions that we read about. But one of them is the story of Naomi and Ruth, right? Naomi and her husband and her 3 boys travel to a land to get work and take care of stuff. They meet 3 girls. The boys meet 3 girls. They get married. Things are looking good. Something comes up. Naomi's husband dies. All 3 boys die. It's now Naomi and her 3 daughters-in-law. And I can only imagine just how much crying and weeping and mourning and questioning God there must have been going on during that season of time. And so finally Naomi says, guys, listen, this isn't home for me. I got family back here, and I'm going to go back. You guys go back to your families. I'm going to go home. 2 of the 3 daughters-in-law say, we'll stay. But Ruth says, I'm coming. I'm going to come with you. And she does, and one thing after another, marries Boaz, who's the kinsman redeemer of the family. And Ruth's name is written in the lineage of the life of Jesus. But I would imagine when they were going through all the death and all the hardship and all those trials, they weren't thinking that out. They were just caught up in the moment. That interruption in their life was hard, but God was doing something that in that case it was a tough thing, but God brought them back and used Ruth in a mighty, mighty way. Here's another interruption in the Bible is Joseph and Mary, planning on getting married, right? They're betrothed. They're still young. They're teenagers, right? They're not as mature as all of you guys. They're teenagers. Betrothed to be married. Mary finds out she's going to be pregnant without Joseph's help. Joseph finds out she's pregnant without his help. He says, well, I'm going to just kind of divorce her quietly. I'll walk away from this. You can only imagine, because back in that time, it was worthy of stoning, somebody getting pregnant out of wedlock. So the crowd around, the families around, the friends and neighbors, they're thinking, what are we going to do with Mary now, right? Whereas that interruption introduces us to the Savior of the world, but it cost Joseph and Mary a lot of heartache. But look what we benefit by. Here's another one. As a pastor, we like when rooms are filled with people. And the story in the Bible is of Philip, who is part of the leadership team of a great revival that's going on. Crowds of people. People are getting saved. People are getting healed. All kinds of stuff is happening. And God calls to Philip and says, Philip, I got something else for you. And God takes Philip and he drops him in another place. He says, here's where I have you. And there's this Ethiopian eunuch who is traveling by caravan. And he happens to be in his Bible. And Philip looks up in the carriage and he says, what are you reading? And the Ethiopian eunuch says, I think this is pointing to a Messiah, but I don't understand all this. So, do you understand this? So Philip, I'm just going to interject, but I say Philip jumps up in the caravan, in the carriage with him, and says, let me explain this to you. And he goes through, and the Ethiopian says, I want this guy. What's keeping me from being baptized? They go and he gets baptized. What does that remind us? It reminds us that God cares about every individual, every single individual. God pulled Philip out of a revival to help him to go minister to just one person. No glamour, no glory, one person. Simon of Cyrene. You guys know who Simon is? He's mentioned 3 times in the Bible, 3 different gospels, 3 different gospel writers felt like it was important to talk about him. Simon of Cyrene was in town with 2 of his kids running errands. They were either on their way to Walmart or they had just left Walmart. Bags of groceries, heading back home. And here comes Jesus. He's been beaten. He's carrying the cross, the beam. He's fallen so many times by this point that he can't carry it anymore. So the Roman soldiers grabs Simon. Say, this is going to be your job. And Simon picks up that beam and he carries it to Golgotha behind Jesus. That's nothing glamorous about that, is it? I think what this reminds me of is that everything that God does and allows in our life has a purpose. Has a purpose. You may not see it as it's unfolding, but everything has a purpose. And I'm going to invite the worship team to come on back up as I wrap up with this last one. Here's another one, Nehemiah. Nehemiah is the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. What that meant was that Nehemiah had to taste the drink and eat the food before the king did to make sure it wasn't poisoned. I don't know about you. Doesn't sound like a job I would sign up for. But Nehemiah hears that the city of David is in ruins. And so he sneaks out at night with a little entourage. He goes back and he is just so heavy laden by what he sees. Like he remembers the stories of his forefathers. He knows what that place looked like in the past, and he comes back and he's just weeping before God. God, why did I have to go see that? What are you trying to show me here? It's an interruption. But that interruption reminds us that God can take any one of us, anybody in this room, and give us a purpose when our heart is broken for the things that breaks God's heart. So I want to close with this. Is it possible that God is speaking to somebody in this room this morning and saying, pardon the interruption, I want to talk to you. I want to spend time with you. I want to share, this is God speaking, I want to share things with you. You want to listen? Will you spend some time with me? Maybe there's just something you need to learn. And you got to press in. Kelly and I and Sam went away for our prayer retreat, man. God blew me away with some things that he shared with us that day. We had to stop what we were doing, get alone with God to hear what he was saying. Maybe you're here this morning and God is saying, pardon the interruption, but I love you too much to let you continue drifting away from me. I'm trying to get your attention this morning. Will you listen? Will you come to me? And I don't know what your situation is, but I do believe that God is bothered by our busyness. We don't have time for him. So when he's trying to interrupt your life, you don't even recognize it. And so this morning, just as Pastor preached last week, going public at the altars, you know, when you come to an altar, there's no shame there. I remember back in the day where every single Sunday, literally every single Sunday, some of you remember this too maybe. I remember back in the day, every single Sunday, I don't care if the pastor preached on going to Golden Corral after church. The altars were full. Not everybody confessing sin. As a matter of fact, 99% of them were up there just worshiping God. But I don't know what your situation is this morning, and I don't know what God is saying to you about an interruption that he is trying to make in your life. But I just want to encourage you this morning as we close in worship, just to say, God, here I am. If you need to repent, repent. Say, God, I'm sorry. I've been too busy. I know you've been speaking to me and I have just avoided it. I've been trying to push it off. You can do that in your seat. You can do that at the altar. But let's close this morning by just saying, God, I do want to hear you this morning. Interrupt my life. Let's stand together and let's worship the Lord.
Hey there, here's your announcements for the week. Get ready for an adventure like no other. At FamFest, families will embark on an exciting journey, exploring God's love through interactive Bible stories, engaging activities, lively music, and creative crafts. It's time to be filled with laughter, learning, and lasting memories. This year's theme, the Bible Olympics, will inspire families to dive deeper into their faith and discover how they can shine God's light in the world around them and pass the torch of faith. Register today and join us July 10th through the 13th.
Here at Riverside, I want to invite you to be a part of our team. Now, our team is not just the paid staff. They are really, really good to work with. But our team involves those who volunteer as well. We are here to change the world. And it's every little detail, every little job that makes that happen. Whether it's behind the scenes, whether it's up close and personal with people, whether it's in leadership positions, whether it's in positions of just standing before kids and telling stories. All of it is part of developing lives to becoming fully committed to Jesus Christ. And these lives will definitely change this city and change this world. If you would like to be a part of our team, please contact the church office and we will get you into that process of how you can be a part of us.
Life groups are all about building community, supporting one another, and growing together in our faith journey. To learn more about the many life groups we offer, check out our website, Church Center app, or contact the office. We are happy to get you connected with a leader.
Join us on June 22nd at the Fredericksburg National Baseball Game for Faith and Family Night. Celebrate with us as Pastor Brian throws out the ceremonial first pitch. Don't miss this unforgettable evening of faith, family, and community.
Riverside is excited to support Choices Women's Center. This is one of our ministry and outreach partners, and we are going to be participating in their baby bottle campaign, which raises money for their ministry. We are doing this Mother's Day through Father's Day, and you get the opportunity to grab a baby bottle, fill it with all your spare change, and then bring it back to church by Father's Day.